Welcome to the City Current Show, powered by Higginbotham Insurance and Financial Services.
This show focuses on sharing good news and powering the good in our community. Now here's your host, City Current CEO, Jeremy Park.
Welcome to the City Current Show, powered by Higginbotham. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We're always honored to bring you inspiring stories of individuals and organizations making a difference and powering the good. And we always love having guest speakers come on the show talking about their new book. And that's why we're honored to have with us Scott Mann. He's a former U.S. Army Green Beret. He's the president and founder of Rooftop Leadership. He's a playwright and actor. He's got 2 other best-selling books. And his current book that's out right now is Nobody is Coming to Save You. And so we have a lot of important topics to cover. Let's go ahead and dive in. Scott, how are you doing?
Hey, thanks for having me on, Jeremy. Doing great. Appreciate it.
Well, before we dive into the book, because I know that this is a part of it, but let's start with your backstory as a U.S. Army Green Beret. So give us a little bit of your backstory.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, that's really defined everything that I've done in my life. Is when I was 14 years old, I grew up in a little logging town in Mount Ida, Arkansas. And all my life, I'd wanted to be John Rambo, but the problem was I looked more like Johnny Appleseed. Very, very small kid, bullied pretty severely. And when I was 14, a Green Beret named Mark came into our soda shop in Mount Ida. And from the second I saw that guy, I knew that's what I wanted to do. And I didn't even know what he did, but he took the time to sit down with me and explain that he was Special Forces, a Green Beret, as they're called. And he told me like what they do. And he explained that out of 1.4 million people in the U.S. military, only 6,500 are on active duty as Green Berets. And that what they do is radically different than the SEALs, the Delta Force, the Rangers, in that those guys are very, very good at surgical targeting and coming in on target, taking it down, and then they come off the target very quickly. And they usually do the mission themselves. Whereas Green Berets, what they do is they work by, with, and through indigenous people, and they help them stand up on their own at a community level from the grassroots up. And they go in with 12, as he explained it, and they come out with 1,200. And that just, helping the little guy stand up against the big guy, that resonated with me so deeply that at 14, that's what I decided to do. And it never wavered. It never wavered through high school, through college. And when, 14 years later, when I was finally able, I tried out. And after about what seemed like 87 recycles, I finally made it through.
So when you talk about being a U.S. Army Green Beret, first and foremost, thank you for your service, your sacrifices, the many combat tours, everything that you've done to protect our country and our freedoms. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Can't say that enough personally. 2 is all of those experiences and those leadership lessons I know became foundational for the books, but also for launching Rooftop Leadership. And so share what led you to launch Rooftop Leadership.
Well, what it was really was going, by definition, Green Berets are dropped into these low trust, high stakes areas. I call it the churn. There's this churn of disconnection and division and distrust that by definition, that's where you go because that's where you're needed to stabilize an area, right? But you have to go in there in 5 minutes or less. You have to build rapport with somebody that's tickling the trigger of their AK-47, trying to decide if they're going to dispatch you or not. So it's a very, very high stakes arena that is already highly distrustful. I did that all of my adult life and built a strong body of work in both art and science for how to use old school interpersonal skills and influence and storytelling and active listening, but also very surgical coercion when necessary. I tell people like a modern day Green Beret is a combination of John Wick, Lawrence of Arabia, and the Verizon guy, and all of those things in different combinations as you deal with them. What I found was when I came home, Jeremy, I thought I would be retiring after several combat tours in Afghanistan in 2013, but instead I came home to a country I didn't recognize anymore. It was extremely divided and distrustful and had a churn of its own. So like Sebastian Junger says in his book, Tribe, most combat veterans are more than willing to die for their country. They just don't know how to live for it. It's hard to know how to live for a country that's tearing itself apart along every imaginable line, from race to religion to politics, as we're seeing today. And it really sent me into a spiral. I thought, man, all of those guys lost over there, all of those times lost for what? So we could tear each other apart here at home. And it put me in this real negative place until eventually, and I almost took my own life as a result of it. And eventually some civilian mentors helped me connect with the power of storytelling as a modality for healing in the beginning. And then it turns out that storytelling helps heal the brain, and it helps us make sense of trauma and grief. And I started to get a sense of myself again and realize that I still had something very powerful to say about this churn that we live in the civilian world, in corporate America, and our communities and our elections. And the skill set that I learned as a Green Beret is actually much more relevant to community leaders today. It's not unique to Green Berets, because the churn we face here at home is so novel and so new that what got you here ain't going to get you there anymore. The leadership that we need to move people in these uncertain, distrustful times, I think, requires what I learned to get people up on rooftops in the villages of Afghanistan. That's why I call it rooftop leadership. It would inspire people to go up on their roofs and take a stand when they were scared and reluctant. And that's the kind of interpersonal skills and leadership that I teach today here at home.
When you look at those experiences, I know they also led to you being a playwright, because when you talk about kind of the experiences of what you went through and the art form to share that, give us a little bit of that side.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think what it all comes down to is storytelling. And this is a really important point I make in my new book, Nobody's Coming to Save You, is that in this modern world, which is the tip of the iceberg of our nature, we think that everything is transactions and PowerPoint and bullet points. But the reality is, they've done studies on one study called Death by PowerPoint, where they found that they hooked audiences up to EEG machines and measured brain activity during PowerPoint. And what they found was that your audience forgets 90% of your content 30 seconds after you say thank you for your time, because you're engaging working memory. You're not even engaging long-term memory. And what I found was, when I came home, was that there's a lot of neuroscience available to us on influence and interpersonal connection that we're not using today. It's a body of work that's very recently available. But what it says is what our grandparents said all along, which is storytelling is the most powerful form of communication in the world. The brain is a metaphorical pattern matching organ. It has a mandate to make sense of the world, and it uses narrative to do it. And so if you develop a narrative muscle, if you develop a skill set for storytelling, you're going to pretty much own every room you walk into, whether that's oral storytelling, written storytelling. And so I made it a point to pursue all of it. What Tim Ferriss obsesses over with high performance, I obsess over with storytelling. And so I dove into writing. I became a news analyst. I studied with tribal storytellers around the world. I studied with Bo Eason. And then at some point, one of my acting coaches, I was taking acting lessons to be a better speaker, said, you should write a play. The stuff that you're talking about, this is a play. And I said to him, Green Berets don't write plays. And he said, why not? It'll heal you. And that kind of got me. So I started quietly writing a play about 7 years ago, Jeremy, that has been evolving ever since. It's called Last Out, Elegy of a Green Beret. And it's based on 3 team sergeants that I had that didn't make it home. And it's a fictional character named Danny Patton, but all the stories are true. And it's about him trying to navigate with his family the longest war in our nation's history in Afghanistan. And the audience goes for the full ride. I played, to complete my midlife crisis, I learned how to act at age 50, and played the role of Danny for 2 touring seasons, to include one produced by Gary Sinise. And now I'm recasting it for 2025 with new actors, new veterans. But to your point, I don't know that I ever planned to do it. I think it was more an extension of immersing myself in the creative side of my brain to use that as a modality to heal. Because when we create, we're open, and we are actually, we start to make sense of the things that don't make sense. And that is what storytelling has given me. And I guess why I found myself writing plays, because I find it very cathartic.
Well, I think, for you, the therapy, the healing on that side, to the honoring the legacy, the memory of, those 3, your teammates, your brothers in war. And then also, too, bringing the community in to have that conversation, right? Like, I think there's the sharing, then the learning, the community that's built as a part of that. So I think that's what makes all of this very special. Carry that into, you've got two other best-selling books, and then we'll dive in really heavy on Nobody Is Coming to Save You.
So the first book I wrote when I came out of the war and out of Afghanistan was called Game Changers: Going Local to Defeat Violent Extremists. And it was because we started the war. I lost my Ranger buddy on 9/11, and I was very angry and went into the war not doing so much the by, with, and through things I talked about, but more walking down the enemy and hunting and retribution. And what we found was 10 years into the war, that wasn't working anymore. And there were more Taliban than when we started. And so we embarked on this program that I was fortunate enough to be one of the architects for, called Village Stability Operations. And it was kind of a modern day Magnificent Seven, Jeremy, where these teams would go out into the villages, grow their beards out, don indigenous garb, and live amongst the Afghan people at a very community-based level. It was a profound experience for me because it showed me just the power and resilience of communities and how broken the communities were in Afghanistan, and that was really at the heart of their problem. It wasn't the broken government. It wasn't the years of war. It was the community resilience had been shattered. And so I wrote a book about that. I wrote a book about what we learned in these dusty villages, and the universal power of human connection, about meeting people where they are, about collaboration as the real game changers is the name of the book. But the game changers are not how many rounds you can put down range or how many bad guys you can take out, but really is the degree of social capital that you can build in a community. And then the second was Operation Pineapple Express, which chronicled the botched Afghanistan withdrawal and the efforts of a group of veterans, one of the groups that I stood up called Task Force Pineapple, to help recover and rescue and honor a promise to our Afghan allies when our government didn't. It was a gutting experience that I'm still involved in to this day, but it did reinforce the power of relationships and trust that you and I have talked about. And once again, the power of community and all of those people that were in those Afghan communities that we had sworn to stand beside, how we as veterans tried to at least get them to safety. And it was weird because I'd never written a book of that caliber, and it hit New York Times bestseller in one day. And I've never experienced anything like that. Don't know that I will again, but I think it spoke to how much the American people felt about what our veterans did in that moment. And it's really a very proud moment to see what our veterans did with no resources, no authority, no time, no access into Afghanistan. They did this all with cell phones and relationships, an open sewage canal, and a 4-foot hole in the fence. And they moved close to 1,000 Afghans to safety. I think it's a testament to what relationships can do.
So carry that into the book that's out right now, Nobody Is Coming to Save You. Give us a couple of the lessons, the major themes that you hope readers take away.
Oh, thank you for that. Honestly, writing that book has been the scariest book I've ever written, because it's a straight up leadership book for community leaders and business leaders. And I've never done that before. It feels very vulnerable, but it's something I've been working on for six years. It is this rooftop leadership. It is this notion that in the times of churn that we live in, where there's so much division and distraction and disengagement at every turn, you can still inspire people to do big stuff and get up on the rooftop and take a stand, that proverbial rooftop, even when there's fear and anger all around you, that churn. And a lot of people were asking me, how did you write a play when you've never written a play? How did you get Gary Sinise to put you on the road and, you as the lead actor when you've never acted? I mean, how did you stand up a task force that had no authority or resources and rescue 1,000 Afghans? And the answer is consistent across the board. The first thing I would tell audiences is to recognize nobody's coming. Nobody's coming to save you. And I don't mean that in a morbid kind of way. I learned this as a young Green Beret officer when a sergeant told me when an attack was imminent, and I kept talking about reinforcements, and he finally stopped me. He said, "Sir, nobody's coming. Okay, it's us. Whatever we have right now, that's it. That's all we have. But that's okay. We've got a good team." And I never forgot that. I never forgot that. And he was so confident and so right. That you don't, if we're waiting on somebody to come riding over the hill on a white horse and save us, we're deluded. And I think it really flies in the face of everything that you guys have built with community, right? I mean, it literally, community is the antibody to absence of leadership and the problems that we're facing today. So that's my biggest takeaway. But The other thing that I would say is we face an unprecedented level of challenges that I call the churn communities do that we haven't seen before. These were things that I've seen in places like rural Afghanistan, war-torn Iraq. This level of churn that we have in the country today is unprecedented. And so leaders who are leading their families, their travel ball teams, their businesses, their Fortune 100, they're up against it in a way that I don't think we've ever seen. And so what I've done is in this book, it is chock full of stories and best practices that I learned as a Green Beret, as an actor, in all of these forays that I took on about how to move people to a rooftop when they're scared and reluctant. And it's mostly old school interpersonal skills that you can put into play right now, using the human operating system and understanding it in a way that most people don't, and how primal we really are. So those would be the high level takeaways. And that at the end of the day, I think better days are in front of us. I really do. I think we're on the edge of that, but we need a skill set that is worthy of that effort.
Yeah. And I love just, the phrasing around that in terms of nobody's coming to save you. Yes, that can be one side, but it can also be extremely empowering when you realize it's taking action, taking responsibility, saying, we've got this, we've got the team, we've got the resources, we can do this. Now let's put our mind to doing it. And I think that to me is very freeing. And I think it's very empowering, especially for business leaders who say, I don't have all the answers. Well, maybe you don't have to. Maybe you just have to start taking action, getting your team involved, and then boom, we can create success. And so talk about how that leads into your keynotes.
Yeah. So the subtitle, as you said, is A Green Beret's Guide to Getting Big Stuff Done. Because I really subscribe to that notion. I think that most of the strategic outcomes that we're going to get done, whether they're business, life, or play, are going to happen. They're going to start grassroots. They're going to be community-based, and they're going to be bottom up. If you look at most of the things that happen in the world that are truly strategic, they are bottom up initiatives. And I can whiteboard them most of the time. I can post-mortem on it and break it down, and it started as a bottom up movement. And so I firmly believe in that. And so my keynotes, what I talk about, are really around that. It is this realization that, first of all, when you look at that piece of cheese that's laying on the floor and starting to stink, and you're waiting for somebody to, somebody should pick that up, right? It's like Coach Bill Courtney says, somebody should do something, right? Well, they're not coming. And the sooner we realize that, the more empowerment we have, the more freeing that is, as you said, the more agency we have. But to go over and pick up that piece of stinking cheese is not, it's much more complex than it used to be. And sometimes it actually requires a collective to do that. In fact, most of the problems we face today, I wish they were as simple as a piece of stinking cheese on the floor, but it's actually like multiple fermented pieces and, all kinds of stuff. There's complexity. And so how do we bring people together around these wicked problems and build movements that allow us to get big stuff done? And that's what my keynotes really focus on, is getting a level of understanding of the churn and the enemy you face and getting big stuff done. And then what is available to you in this primal creature, this human operating system in the realm of meaning and emotional temperature and storytelling and struggle, that you can leverage to get big stuff done, even when you don't have resources or time, and put it into play immediately. So my keynotes are chock full of stories from Pineapple Express, the play Last Out, my own struggles and mental health challenges that I faced and how I had to overcome them through what I'm telling folks that they should try. So it is a narrative ride when I do my keynotes. It's almost more like a one-person play in many ways than a keynote.
Well, this is one of those conversations that could go on forever. There's so many amazing topics to dive into. We'll save all that for a later date, but wrap up with where we can go to get the book, to follow you and your efforts. Where do we go to carry this conversation forward?
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. ScottMann.com has all of my stuff on it. You can also order the book there in the signed version, gift box. And then most recently, I've started a Patreon site, a Scott Mann Patreon site, where we go deep on a lot of the stuff that we're talking about here for about the price of a cup of coffee. But there's also the podcast and other stuff that's available for free. So ScottMann.com and Patreon are the two best places to find my programs and my books and the content that I think will help people get big stuff done.
Well, make sure everyone go get the book. Nobody is coming to save you. A Green Beret's Guide to Getting Big Stuff Done. Scott Mann, thank you for all you do to power the good. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you, Jeremy. It's an honor.
Higginbotham Insurance and Financial Services is proud to power the City Current Show. We're a people-first company that protects what matters most, the families, businesses, and trailblazers that keep our community going. As one of the nation's top independent insurance firms, Higginbotham is a single-source solution for business insurance, employee benefits, HR services, and personal insurance that's customized for you. We're here to serve you, the people you care about, and your community. Call 866-377-1959 or visit higginbotham.com.